On March 4th, 1861, Abraham Lincoln is inaugurated as America's 16th president, and thus assumes the mantle of commander-in-chief as well. Now, this is a position Lincoln is not prepared for, especially in comparison to his Southern counterpart, Jefferson Davis. Davis was a West Point graduate, a veteran of the Mexican-American War, and had served as Secretary of War. Lincoln, in contrast, had spent a 4-month stint in the Illinois State Militia during the Black Hawk War, where by his own admission, the only thing he fought was mosquitoes. Now, Lincoln was ever the quick study. He overcomes his deficit in tactical and strategic knowledge fairly quickly. Numerous trips to the Library of Congress, analysis of the success and failures of his commanders and their forces, and to a large degree his own common sense. Lincoln will actually get to the point where he grasps the large strategical picture better than a lot of his own commanders did. There's no evidence that Lincoln studied Clausewitz or Sun Tzu, yet he will incorporate their concepts into his writings. He understood Clausewitz's big picture, that war is a continuation of policy by other means. He will get the tactical analysis of Sun Tzu of pitting your strengths against your enemy's weaknesses and protecting your weaknesses from their strengths. Unfortunately, this is a concept not all of his commanders accepted or understood, and in one in particular was Major General George McClellan. Now, early in the conflict, Lincoln would generally defer to his commanders' tactics and strategies. But by mid-1862, after a series of losses, Lincoln begins to take a much more active role in military affairs, especially with the recalcitrant George McClellan. Now, McClellan shared a lot of the same qualities of his former commanding general of the Army and hero of the Mexican-American War, Winfield Scott. They were both excellent organizers. They both inspired loyalty in their men, and they were both convinced of their own military genius. Unfortunately, McClellan lacked Scott's daring and aggressiveness. Now, McClellan's timidity really begins to show during the Peninsula Campaign and will become clearly evident to the president during and after the Battle of Antietam. Several days prior to the Battle of Antietam, 2 Union soldiers will happen chance upon Lee's battle plans, wrapped around 3 cigars. They will pass this intelligence up to McClellan's headquarters. Obviously, McClellan's thrilled to have this info, but he's very slow to act upon it. He'll wait 17 hours before he starts to march his troops toward Lee's. And as we go into this battle, McClellan will ignore one of those big concept operational decisions, which is force concentration. McClellan's going into this battle with a 2-to-1 advantage. However, he doesn't commit his forces in a robust manner. He will just commit his forces in a piecemeal manner. 25% of his troops will never even participate, while Lee is using every soldier and has no reserve. Lee will even stand and offer battle for day 2. McClellan will not accept. At the end of day 2, Lee will take his army of Northern Virginia and slip back across the Potomac. McClellan at this point will telegraph Washington of a complete victory. In his eyes, he has saved the Union the second time. In the eyes of President Lincoln and General Halleck, it is an opportunity loss. They had Lee pinned. They had Lee outnumbered, and yet they let him get away. Following the Battle of Antietam, President Lincoln will personally travel to meet with George McClellan. During this meeting, they will review McClellan's actions, and Lincoln will explain why he felt McClellan had missed an opportunity to strike a crushing blow for the cause. Prior to Lincoln's departure, he'll make it blatantly clear to McClellan that he expects him to cross the Potomac and pursue Lee's army. 2 days later, General Halleck will send a telegram to McClellan ordering him to cross the Potomac and pursue the enemy. McClellan, however, does not. He will respond with telegram after telegram and a litany of excuses. A frustrated president will finally respond with the following letter.
Executive Mansion, Washington, October 13, 1862. Major General McClellan. My dear sir, You remember my speaking to you of what I called your overcautiousness. Are you not overcautious when you assume that you cannot do what the enemy is constantly doing? Should you not claim to be at least his equal in prowess and act upon the claim?
Now, other than the salutation, there are no niceties here. Obviously, frustrated president goes straight to the meat of the matter, immediately calling into question McClellan's leadership and military prowess. He also reiterates his concerns about McClellan's overcautiousness or timidity, and infers that this is not an issue with the Southern commanders. As a matter of fact, Confederate General Stuart's cavalry had just completed a raid circumnavigating McClellan's army. The president continues.
As I understand, you telegraphed General Halleck that you cannot subsist your army at Winchester unless the railroad from Harper's Ferry to that point be put in working order. But the enemy does now subsist his army at Winchester at a distance nearly twice as great from railroad transportation as you would have to do without the railroad last named. He now wagons from Culpeper, which is just about twice as far as you would have to do from Harper's Ferry. He is certainly not more than half as well provided with wagons as you are. I certainly should be pleased for you to have the advantage of the railroad from Harper's Ferry to Winchester, but it wastes all the remainder of the autumn to give it to you, and in fact ignores the question of time, which cannot and must not be ignored.
Now, in response to McClellan's telegrams concerning logistic support as a reason for not advancing, Lincoln basically dismisses it. He illustrates that while the situation may not be ideal, McClellan is in a much more advantageous position than the enemy is. Lincoln agrees that having a railroad would be beneficial, but stresses that there is absolutely no time to wait for its completion. Lincoln understands how time would affect more than just military operations. Unfortunately, McClellan never will.
Again, one of the standard maxims of war, as you know, is to operate upon the enemy's communications as much as possible without exposing your own. You seem to act as if this applies against you, but cannot apply in your favor. Change positions with the enemy. And think you not he would break your communication with Richmond within the next 24 hours? You dread his going into Pennsylvania. But if he does so in full force, he gives up his communication to you absolutely, and you have nothing to do but follow and ruin him. If he does so with less than full force, fall upon and beat what is left behind all the easier.
The communication Lincoln speaks of here is lines of communication, or LOCs in modern terminology. These are the routes that connect a operating unit with its supply base or its objectives. Lincoln not only reminds McClellan of this standard maxim of war, but even illustrates to him how it would work to his advantage to advance. Obviously, McClellan probably does not take this well. This is a lesson that is taught to first-year cadets at West Point, and one, unfortunately, the president has to remind him of.
Exclusive of the waterline, you are now nearer Richmond than the enemy is by the route that you can take and that he must take. Why can you not reach there before him unless you admit that he is more than your equal on a march? His route is the arc of a circle, while yours is the chord. The roads are as good on yours as on his.
At this point in the letter, Lincoln blatantly throws down the challenge and once again calls into question McClellan's military acumen. Lincoln's patience is at its end, and this would probably be McClellan's last chance at redemption. Could he prevent Lee from interposing his army between Richmond and the Army of the Potomac?
You know I desired, but did not order you to cross the Potomac below instead of above the Shenandoah and Blue Ridge. My idea was that this would at once menace the enemy's communications, which I would seize if he would permit. If he should move northward, I would follow him closely, holding his communications. If he should prevent our seizing his communications and move toward Richmond, I would press closely to him, fight him if a favorable opportunity should present, and at least try to beat him to Richmond on the inside track. I say try. If we never try, we shall never succeed. If he take a stand at Winchester, moving neither north nor south, I would fight him there, on the idea that if we cannot beat him when he bears the wastage of coming to us, we never can where we bear the wastage of going to him. This proposition is a simple truth, and it is too important to be lost sight of for a moment. In coming to us, he tenders us an advantage which we should not waive. We should not so operate as to merely drive him away, and we must beat him somewhere, or finally, we can do it, if at all, easier near us than far away. If we cannot beat the enemy where he is now, we never can, he again being within the entrenchments of Richmond.
Now Lincoln will continue to point out different strategies, and he makes it patently clear that the objective is not to drive the enemy away. The objective is to beat him. Lincoln is obviously exasperated with McClellan, but he almost sounds fatherly when he implores them to at least try. Now Lincoln will continue in his letter in great detail analysis of possible routes and appropriate strategies. These should have been all too evident to McClellan, but possibly this is Lincoln's way of trying to prevent any future excuses. Lincoln's last line is most telling, however.
It is all easy if our troops march as well as the enemy, and it is unmanly to say that they cannot do it.
Now Lincoln has obviously thrown down the gauntlet in this last statement. He understands that our troops are man enough to make this happen. But is McClellan? This is the test Lincoln puts before him. Now Lincoln will close out his letter that this is in no sense an order. And while it may not have been an official order, it's obviously the desire of the commander-in-chief, and McClellan should give it his utmost effort. McClellan will fail this test miserably. He won't advance his army across the Potomac till November 1st. His slow march to the south will allow Confederate General James Longstreet to position his forces between McClellan and Richmond. By November 5th, Lincoln has had enough, and he will relieve McClellan of his command.